Hello everyone, I'm Cryshulvo Umbrea of Leviathan server, and this is my guide to Summoner. So you decided to play Summoner, but you didn't realize you'd have to think so much on what to do and when to do it and on whom to do it. Managing your pet can be extremely frustrating at times, but don't let all the negatives turn you away from one of the most fun and rewarding jobs in the game. Summoner is a caster with melee auto attacks, a pet, great mobility, plenty of AoE damage, and moderate support. Make sure to go back and read and reread all of your abilities and spells, because you might be surprised to learn a few things that you missed before. With that said, I will not mention the specific description of every ability and spell, and will assume that everyone understands what each one does. If you have difficulty with all of the extra spells and abilities from Heavensward, then go practice Summoner in the level 50 dungeons and raids to get used to keeping up the dots and managing the pet. First, let's look at the stats that Summoners use and the importance of these stats. First and most important is Intelligence. Summoner's main stat is Intelligence, and you should put all of your points into Intelligence. The most important secondary stat for Summoners is Critical Hit Rate. As of right now, I think it's most important to stack as much crit on Summoner as possible. After crit, you're going to want to get as much Determination as possible. And then finally, you don't want much spell speed because it's just going to end up costing you more mana and you'll lose a lot of potency. Next, let's look at the cross-class abilities that Summoners can use. First, we have Raging Strikes, which is from level 4 Archer. This significantly increases your DPS, especially if used in conjunction with Dreadroom Trance and Tri-Disaster. Next is Swiftcast from level 26 Thaumaturge. This is needed for DPS increase with Shadowflare or moving due to mechanics. It's also invaluable if your pet dies, so you can resummon them. Not to mention the amazing support for your group if someone dies, so you can raise them instantly. The next ability is Blizzard II from level 12 Thaumaturge. This is used for AoE DPS. The last cross-class ability that I think is required is Quelling Strikes from level 34 Archer. Quelling Strikes is needed for your opener or any time in a dungeon when you'll be using buffs on a big pack of mobs. It's also extremely important in fights with adds like A4 Savage. You won't believe how many times I've died to the Shrapdoll, even when using Quelling Strikes. Thanks, Ninja Win. Surecast is from level 8 Thaumaturge. This one is good in A2 Savage, or when anything might hit you that will interrupt your cast. The last cross-class ability is Hawkeye, and it's completely useless from level 26 Archer. Just don't use it. Now let's talk about the opener. In my opinion, you should find one that suits you best and master it. Having one that matches your playstyle is more important than having the most optimal one. In dungeons, you'll rarely get to use your full opener, which is fine, since you want to be using most of your cooldowns quickly for efficiency and speed. I won't be covering the opener that I use and its variations here, but look forward to it in the future. Spells and abilities, when to use them, and in what order. You'll want to start with Bio 2, Miasma, Bio, followed by Contagion if you're using Garuda Eggy, and then Bane or Fester. The most important thing to remember as a summoner is your dots are the majority of your damage. Therefore, if you let them fall off for too long, you aren't playing to the best of your ability. There will be times when your dots will fall off, but don't worry too much about it at the time. Just reapply them as soon as possible, and make note of it in your head if this situation arises so that you can be aware of the timings left on your dots. Make sure to reapply your dots close to the time when they will fall off without them actually falling off. Dot ticks are based off of the server time, so it's important to always have them up on your targets at all times. Try to recast Miasma and Bio 2 around 3 to 4 seconds left, and Bio around 1 to 2 seconds. If single target, always Fester. If 2 or more targets, you want to Bane, unless the other targets are going to die before you can get 2 ticks of your dots. An example of this would be in A1 Savage when the first set of alarms come out. During progression, using Bane is most likely beneficial, but once you and your group are more geared, chances are Painflare is better since they will die a lot faster. If on multiple targets you will have all your dots up and have Shadowflare and Miasma II, and it's time to use another Aetherflow stack, then Painflare is your best choice. But keep in mind, if you will need to save another stack of Aetherflow for a Bane, otherwise you might just sit there with no dots deciding whether to re-dot each ad individually, focus one down, or Miasma II and Blizzard 2 spam. Use pet buffs and cooldowns pretty much off cooldown. I'll discuss this more later on. Be aware of the delay on bio and Tri-Disaster application. A common mistake that most summoners use is baning or festering before bio or Tri-Disaster registers. There is time to Painflare before using Bane after applying bio. This is really useful in dungeons and in A2. Aetherflow should be used off cooldown almost always, unless you're sacking or enraging dolls in A4, or if you still have stacks left unused. The more Aetherflows you can get in a fight, the more DPS you can do. Try to line up your buffs like Dreadworm Trance, Raging Strikes, and Potion with Tri-Disaster. In your normal rotation, it's best to have it coming off of cooldown with Aetherflow so you can readily use it with Dreadworm Trance and stacks of Aetherflow. I will sometimes hold Tri-Disaster for a long time, especially in A4 Savage when there are long breaks between phase transitions. In order to get the most out of your Dreadworm Trance's 15 seconds, you will want to use 2 Aetherflow stacks and hold the third one for about 25 seconds, so that you can line it up with another 2 more with your next Dreadworm Trance. This is vital to the Heavensward summoner rotation. Miasma II should only be used when hitting 2 or more targets. Definitely use it when in Dreadworm Trance, or if you have Raging Strikes up and will be hitting more than one target. Keep in mind, when hitting 2 targets, you must get near full duration on both targets for efficiency. This is very useful in A2 and A3 Savage ads and hand phases. It's critical in the final phase of A3 Savage when the hand comes out for both DPSing the boss and hand, as well as slowing the hand so that it doesn't reach the lightning before it's killed. Shadowflare should be up at all times for the most part. It's another one of the dots, so don't forget it. Special cases are if the boss will be moving a lot, like in Thornton or A3 Savage. In those fights, there will be times when you won't want to play Shadowflare, unless you're a masochist and enjoy seeing the tank move the boss out of your Shadowflare. There are times when clipping Shadowflare is inevitable. Don't be afraid to do so, because in comparison to Ruin, the potency of Shadowflare is more than double after your 4th Shadowflare. Use Ruin 3 in your opener and in Dreadworm Trance. The only other times are if you're given free MP, have a lot of MP and are going to sack, or near the end of a fight and still have some extra MP to use. Ruin 2 when weaving off globals or moving for a mechanic or ground AoE. Ruin 1 as much and often as you can when all of your dots are up. This will save you more mana, which means you'll be able to put out more DPS overall. Blizzard 2 is technically better in potency than Ruin when hitting 2 or more targets, but you will run out of mana quickly, so be careful. It pretty much evens out in mana efficiency at 4 or more targets, but you still can't spam it too much. Please use this ability after all your dots are up, especially in dungeons. Eye for an Eye and Virus are 2 support abilities that are very strong and should not be overlooked, both in dungeons and hardcore raid settings. In dungeons, throw out Eye for an Eye on the tank pretty much whenever it's available. It's better to do it when he's going to do a large pool, but try not to hold off too long in order to maximize efficiency. In dungeons, feel free to virus on any mob that hits hard or on a boss. In a raid environment, work with the healers on when you will want to Eye for an Eye and virus. Virus is key in fights like A3 Savage with big bursts like Cascade. If you have a scholar, you can communicate with them on which ones they will want to get and which ones you should get. If you are pugging, then use eye for an eye at spots in the fight that it looks like the healers are struggling, or if you know something big is coming up, like the 4 Jaggedalls phase in A2 Savage. It's always great to have eye for an eye up on the main tank during final phase of A3 to help the healers out a little bit. Swiftcast Resurrection. In my opinion, this is what makes Summoner superior to Black Mage in support. Having a free, quick resurrection from a job that isn't a healer is invaluable, especially during progression. I can't even count how many times me raising somebody has recovered the group from wiping and actually gotten the clear on the encounter because of doing so. Even without Swiftcast, hard raising an incapacitated raid member can save the group in many cases, especially if the person you are raising is a healer and the other healer is busy solo healing the group. Be aware you will need to communicate with the group on who will raise whom. It can be beneficial to set up a priority list on who raises first, but there will always be times when you need to communicate about Swiftcast cooldown both on you and your healers. Deathflare is by far the coolest of Summoner's abilities. It takes practice on knowing if you can get that extra global off before your Dreadworm chance runs out, but even the best Summoners will miss it by the slightest second. If you are casting something and realize mid-cast that your Dreadworm trance is going to end, move to cancel your cast and Deathflare right away. You don't want to miss that 400 plus potency, unless you're raising in an emergency situation. The only ever acceptable times to Deathflare with more than 3 seconds left on Dreadworm chance is when in a situation like an A3 or A1 Savage, where there's an Ad alive about to run into the lightning, or you have to kill the alarm before the missile comes out, and this is the only way to save your raid. I've saved my raid group from wiping a couple times in A3 by popping Dreadworm chance when I see a couple ads about to enter the lightning. Depending on the ad's health, I would use Ruin 2, Painflare, Ruin 2, Deathflare. The other situation to use Deathflare early is if you can hit multiple targets, but you only have a limited time frame to do so. For example, in A3 Savage ads phase, you can target the ads if they spawn close to each other. Or if you like to pad your numbers, target the tornado and hit all 4 piston lubricants before they start moving. The last thing about Deathflare is when using a Fester before Deathflaring, make sure you watch the timing on your Dreadworm chance, because sometimes the animation on Fester can make you miss Deathflare. Pet controls are awful in this game, so be prepared to have to spam what you want your pet to do, because sometimes they will go full diva mode and refuse to listen. Garuda Eggy must always be on Obey because of Contagion. Ifrit Eggy can be used on either Sick or Obey depending on your preference and micromanaging ability. You can also switch in and out of Sick and Obey with Ifrit Eggy in fights in order to optimize timings of Radiant Shield. If using Ifrit Eggy on Obey, don't forget to use his other 2 abilities, Crimson Cyclone and Flaming Crush on cooldown. Placing and replacing your pet is required in almost every hardcore fight. Always be aware of where your pet is in relation to yourself, the boss or mobs, and the healers. When learning a fight, be ready for your pet to die because it is inevitable, except for maybe on fights like Thornton Extreme and A1 Savage. A2, A3, and A4 all require you to move your pet to safe places or else they might die, especially in final phase of A3. Look at where your tanks are positioning the boss and place your pet behind the boss anytime he moves, unless you know the pet will be safe from the cleave. It's important to note that if you give your pet a command while it is en route to its destination, it will cancel its movement to execute the command. Aerial Slash is sometimes the most overlooked ability that summoners have. Use it on cooldown to increase DPS. Also, it as well as all pet abilities can be used even while you are casting something else, so get used to doing 2 things at once. Make sure that you have it on your bars so you know when it's coming off of cooldown. If you ordered your pet to do something and realize you made a mistake, go ahead and heal your pet to you quickly before it executes the command and then Sick or Obey it back to the target. An example of this is if you told Garuda Eggy to Aerial Slash, but you realize you want to save it for a couple seconds for ads. If you can heal her before she executes the command, she will not use Aerial Slash. The same situation can happen with Enkindle. I'm not 100% sure, but I think you can do the same thing with Steady, which would actually be more efficient since your pet won't move from its position to cancel the action. Just remember to Sick or Obey your pet after doing so. Pets won't listen, so hit that button 3 to 5 times. In extreme cases, stop whatever you're doing and spam it more until you see the pet listen. Tricks of the trade. It's the little things that make all the difference. Stutter Stepping. Black mages are experts at stutter stepping because of their long cast times and need to stand still for long periods of time. But the best summoners have also mastered this technique in order to optimize DPS while doing mechanics and dodging ground AOEs. There is a point in your cast that will ensure the spell will complete even if you move. Play around until you get used to it and start to feel more comfortable with it. At first it will be difficult and you will cancel a lot of spells, but in the end it's worth it so you can use it in raid situations to get more spells off while traveling around the arena. Just remember, Shadowflare's cast time is about half a second longer than everything else, so the timing isn't quite the same. I'm guilty of canceling the cast on many occasions, but when you do it right, you feel like a pro. Cooldowns. When to use them and when to hold them. This is arguably the most difficult and complex part of the Summoner kit. This must be thought out and planned in every encounter, but especially in fights like A2 Savage during progression and A4 Savage, depending on the strat that your group uses. You must also be flexible with your cooldown timings based off of what happened to yourself and other raid members in order to salvage the group from wiping. A great example of this is an A3 Savage. Perhaps one of your DPS members has the DPS down debuff. This is when you should know you cannot Bane onto both hands before or during the equal concentration. You might have to use all 3 Aetherflow stacks for Fester to help them get the hand percentages close enough to not wipe. Knowing the mechanics and phases of each fight are key in determining what abilities and cooldowns you will be using and which you will be saving. For example, in A2 Savage, be aware of your Aethertrail attunement stacks and how fast your group is pushing each wave. Try to save Dreadworm Trance for the start of the next wave so that you can get the most DPS out of your buff dots. Another example of this is in A4 Savage. If your group is letting the Strap Dolls in rage, you will have to be aware of when to hold Aetherflow and use Aetherflow stacks for energy drain in order to replenish your mana. Lining up Raging Strikes with Dreadworm Trance is a must, especially if using Garuda Eggy. Rouse, Spur, and Enkindle will sometimes be available at awkward times, but there are cases when it's better not to use them as soon as they come back. For example, A3 Savage, if the living liquid is sub 25% health, chances are you won't get another Enkindle in the fight. If you know the hand is coming out soon, and you will be able to hit both the boss and the hand, then it's beneficial to save Rouse, Spur, and Enkindle for that point. Not to mention, you might need to save Enkindle to help with DPSing the hand in order to kill it before it takes your healer to his doom in the lightning. Another example is Garuda's Aerial Slash. This is often overlooked by most summoners, but remember, if you are able to hit multiple targets with this ability, it's a huge increase in DPS. It's worth holding this ability like an A1 Savage for when the alarms come out, even if you are holding it for half of its cooldown time, because hitting 3 targets is like getting 2 extra aerial slashes for free. Auto attacks. Whenever you get the chance to stand next to the target you are hitting, please make sure you are auto attacking it. It's free damage, and over time it definitely adds up. Bio Reapplication. If you have an ability that is increasing your damage like Raging Strikes, Dreadworm Trance, or Balance, then clip Bio if it has around 5 to 9 seconds remaining before using Contagion. If you have already used Contagion and you have a Balance, then feel free to refresh Bio if it has 2 to 9 seconds left and your Balance is running out. You can practice this with every Dreadworm Trance you get if you are lining it up with Aetherflow. This should only be done if all of your other dots are up on every target and you would otherwise be using a Ruin. Perfect scenario for this is A3 Savage when the hand has just finished Digititis, and you want to get Dreadworm Trance dots on the hand with a Contagion before he splits into 2 so you can Bane onto the other one for more DPS. Not dodging area of effects. There are times when it's okay to stand in the AoE, and others when you need to cancel your cast and dodge. An example of when to cancel your cast and move is in A2 Savage, the Blitzdraw ground AoE. This will kill you, so you have to get out of it no matter what. A great example of one where you can take it is in A4 Savage, Seed of the Sky. This thing hits for about 8 to 9,000 damage, so you can potentially take 2 of them with shields. But be careful of Perpetual Ray and other AoE damage like Carnage Zero that comes afterwards. It takes practice knowing what your healers can handle and when you need to just dodge all the AoEs. Aethertrail Attunement Realignment. It's inevitable that you will at one point lose a stack of Aethertrail Attunement for some reason or another. Feel free to sigh, but remember it's not the end of the world. At that point, you have a few choices. You can finish off all of your Aetherflow stacks and let the Aethertrail Attunement stacks fall off. Or you can continue on with your uneven Aetherflow and Aethertrail Attunement stacks. Your last option is continuing on, but instead of using Dreadworm Chance when you have 3 Aethertrail Attunement stacks, go ahead and use the other stacks, or stack, left to make it realign again before using Aetherflow. Multi-dodging. This is how you increase your DPS substantially. You do this when you cannot Bane onto the other targets. A1 Savage is the perfect example of this, and it's also the best place to practice it. Saving Tri-Disaster for applying buff dots is very beneficial. Keep track of the dots as much as you can in your head, and don't be afraid to constantly check where they are at so you know when to reapply. However, when doing this, it's also important not to lose globals. Sprint. Sprint should be used as often as possible since you have no need for TP. This ability is extremely helpful in countless situations. Very good summoners know when to use it so they can do mechanics and dodge AoEs quickly without having to lose any globals. Examples of times to use Sprint are A3 Savage right before Watch Away, A4 Savage when the lasers are coming out and you want to run quickly to get in position of your laser, and Thornton Extreme pretty much in literally every part of that fight. If you don't need to hold Sprint for anything in the near future and you will be weaving for whatever reason, then it's definitely worth using Sprint. Another thing to note is Sprint usage increases the limit break gauge. Shadowflare. As much as possible when only hitting one target, try to only cast Shadowflare outside of Dreadworm Trance. You will have plenty of other things to do while in Dreadworm Trance. Casting Shadowflare on a single target should not be one of them. If hitting multiple targets, then it's better to cast Shadowflare in Dreadworm Trance. Try to recast Shadowflare at 3 seconds left for optimizing its efficiency. You want the next Shadowflare to be cast right after the previous one has ended. Hope this information has been helpful to you and given you a few things to think about next time you play Summoner. Don't be overwhelmed by everything and focus on improving one thing at a time until it becomes natural and easy. Remember, these are all my opinions and thoughts about how to play this job, so they are not the only things to consider when learning or improving on your Summoner gameplay. If you have any questions, comments, or interesting remarks, please put them down in the comment section. Thanks for watching, and feel free to subscribe for more future content.